Um, Dr. Derek Ireland has been a senior economist and public and private sector uh, uh, business specialist for over 5 decades, and well, at least 5 decades, let's put it that way. He may be working on his sixth. And he did his BA initially at UBC in Asian Studies, and did an MA at Carleton University in the early, well, the 1970s. He then went back to university in 2003 and did a PhD, which he received in 2009. So a mature student back at university. That's really great. Uh, his recent passion has been behavioral law and economics. And as I'm sure you've seen his bio in our announcement, but I'll just summarize it as that here. And he has worked extensively, as you may have been noted from his bio, in Asia in particular, but also in parts of the Middle East, the Gulf region, or the Arabian Peninsula, more specifically, as well as in Southern Africa. And Eric has recently developed a deep interest in artificial intelligence. So today we are going to hear from we're going to hear the challenges and the musings of an economist on AI complexity and chaos. So I'd like to turn it over to you, Derek, to give us a fascinating presentation.
Okay, are you going to show the presentation, or am I just speaking to it?
You have to load it.
No, I do not have that capability.
Oh, I see. Okay, well then I'll have to, if you don't mind, you can chat among each other. I'll just go and find your deck and load it
Yeah.
up.
No, well, it's something we were going to talk about at 12:45, and that didn't happen. Yeah,
Okay,
sorry about that.
Steve, maybe you can facilitate what's going on now. Well, till I come
Okay,
back.
let me just add some points regarding what I'm doing here. I've been very interested in artificial intelligence, as I think most of the rest of you have been, for at least the last 2 years, and it's been a pretty long, drawn-out process. I presented my first presentation to FSN back eight months ago in December 2024, which, from my point of view, was well received in the sense that I learned a lot from you. I then took that presentation and made it into a working paper that ended up on what they call the Social Science Research Network. But I've also found over the last 8 months, the thing is just simply, in a sense, became even more complex and in a very real way, chaotic. And therefore, as a consequence, I've been adding some chaos theory aspects to what was originally based on behavioral economics and complexity science, which are areas that I actually worked on before. Chaos theory to me is totally new. So if anybody knows more about it than I do, it's going to be very easy. And you can criticize me all you like. What this is sort of like saying what's happened in the last 8 months that's different from what I might have presented back in December. I'm also going to be presenting parts of this paper in about 10 days' time to a academic conference called the Canadian Law and Economics Association in Toronto, who I've been presenting to them now over the last probably 10 to 12 years, the behavioral law and economic stuff that I've been doing, and often presenting to you people as well. So it's been a very, very nice arrangement. I'll be back there in I will be back there in a few days, in a couple of weeks. Okay, I think I'm just going to be. I think I pretty well covered the first few slides, Peter.
Okay.
Just stop on this one. Basically, this was in my previous one, except I've added some chaos to the chaos. What I'm looking at is a world where things are very interrelated, where the mistakes that governments make can be affecting the future of AI and also the external environment that AI is now operating in. Those mistakes as well can be picked up by and replicated and amplified by the what I call regulated entities. I'm a regulation guy. And so I'm just dealing with this and going back to it, and I'll probably be touching on it from time to time. Next.
Oh, sorry.
Peter,
As I
I think
said,
you've opened the Excuse me a second, Peter. I think you've opened the PDF, not the PowerPoint. And as a
Yes,
result, we're not seeing the full
yes, I
slide.
agree. Yeah.
So
Okay.
either reduce the scale on this or reload the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I'll do
Sorry.
the load. Sorry about that, folks. You can go ahead and chat.
Yeah, the key thing
Um,
is I have what I've been enjoying tremendously as somebody who literally this is my first year of retirement. I'm 82, and it's my first year that I can say I'm truly retired because this is the first year that I don't have a contract with some outside player, and I will not be sending an invoice this year. So my last one was early in January 2024. So I had lots of time to try to absorb the incredible amount of stuff that the FSN people have been sending on AI and related issues. I thank Stephen for that, but I thank a lot of Peter as well, but a lot of other people as well. There's been a lot to cover, and what I've been finding, and that hence the going back to chaos theory, is the world has become an awful lot more dangerous, an awful lot scarier, and in many respects an awful lot less favorable. And I think for for us to find a way to get the most out of this really interesting technology. For those who attended the first my first effort back in December, I tried a more balanced approach where I was looking at both the goods and the bads. I use those kind of terms. It's easier when you're doing PPTs to use those kind of terms. I found two things in the last 8 months. I found it was quite easy to be fairly balanced about that. Just stay there, Peter. That's great. Uh, with my initially, there's not a lot of great information right now coming out on the really good side of AI, and I know it's there, but it's not being picked up very much, or it's done from a very scientific point of view, whereas the bads are, of course, much more are much better. A couple of points that I made in the first presentation that I'll bring back to you is some ideas on how to build public trust and confidence, and I'll get back on that. I think I'm very worried the people who are making AI are the ones that could kill the technology, because if you use it badly to manipulate people and so on, I think you're going to be selling the technology short. Next, this just talks about what I was just already saying, the fundamental changes since then. The external environment, I think, has gone very, it has become extraordinarily interesting and and perhaps a lot less favorable for the technology, but some people can disagree with that. Uh, I blame most things on the president of the United States. That's probably not fair. I had the same habit with certain prime ministers of Canada. A rainy day was caused by Stephen Harper, which wasn't true. But I think though that the external environment that the technology in general is facing is in a more difficult spot from the point of view of building broad-based acceptance. Next. I'm going to hit 13 cross-cutting themes to start with. I love the concept of double-edged swords, and I'm not the only one using it in this literature. We've got to the point now where the same task, even from an AI task, but certainly the same AI model, can generate good things and can generate bad things. And I'm a competition guy, and you can use exactly the same technology and application to stop price collusion as facilitate price collusion. And it's one that I often use. As well, these double-edged swords have been coming across now in a much broader range of areas. A lot of them in the area of mental health, in education. Some very interesting work going on how AI can tell us more about human intelligence. But as well, there's some that I call the existential double-edged sword, some of which are actually promoted by the creators of this technology, i.e., we can destroy the world, or we can greatly help humanity, and there seems to be very little in between. I think that's a problem. There's also debates about whether AI is more dangerous climate change and nuclear war. I'm not one of those who agrees with that, but that's coming up in some of the more, shall we say, dystopian material that I've been looking at from you guys. Next. I think these things, the double-edged sword aspect, when I write up when I write up my second paper, will get even more attention. And what I'm really finding as well is the stuff on good news is very difficult to find. It's the stuff on bad news that's getting an awful lot of attention, and being in many respects to non-experts like me more convincing. And that gets us into the difficulty of the negativity bias influencing a lot of people in terms of how they look at AI. Next. I've spent some time thinking about government because, of course, I worked in government for 30 years. I consulted to government probably for another 20 years, and so on. And I'm stuck by a couple of things that just came up actually quite recently. The first thing that I thought about is that first off, governments, generally speaking, have less experience with this technology now, and a lot of other technologies, from my experience, than the private sector. Secondly, when things go wrong with the technology, particularly like AI, businesses are in a better position to know to know that it's going wrong and to measure how much it's going wrong, and that there's advertising campaigns will get less feedback. Their rate of return will go down. They will work on something that, believe it or not, my wife had worked on when she worked with EDC, on how you would know you're getting good return on investment when you're working with a non-private sector kind of entity, that kind of thing. Next. Also, basically, what I'm hearing is a lot of people thinking that AI is going to save the day and make governments more efficient and allow it more efficient, have fewer employees, and so on and so forth. But I don't think I've really heard too much about exactly how all that is going to happen and in what way it's going to happen. And quite often, the people in government that produce their papers on this simply presume the AI benefits are going to be there and ignore all the bad side of that I was talking about in my last presentations, captured in the term hallucinations, which some people suggest is a bit of a marketing ploy, which I agree with. But when you get down to it, they're just buying the hype, and they're not looking at the bad side because they think it's going to solve a whole bunch of problems. Next. Everything in the world is becoming more complex, and I actually bought the book, Steve, and you said a great piece on a guy, actually an Ottawa behavioral economist, who did a piece on the need for government to have a long-term approach and a future conscious approach. I believe AI will work against that. The kind of thoughtless, deliberative kind of style you need for long-term thinking in government. I don't think AI is going to help out very much, except in some of the more mundane tasks. And what I put at the bottom here is what I say later on is since if government doesn't know how to regulate AI, and from my point of view, they've gone almost no distance whatsoever, how can we expect that they're going to use it effectively, efficiently, and in a way that will help voters and citizens and so on? Next. I think I've already covered this, but I think that just having faster decisions in government isn't necessarily going to mean that they're going to be better decisions and that more future-oriented decisions. And some people are making some very good points about what the problem is with that. Next. This is my final theme on this. There's a very good literature, and I totally agree with this literature, that governments and their regulatory authorities should be a lot more modest and humble and long-term oriented when they're assessing innovation and technology. People have been calling that for a long time. Quick decisions by government on a technology like AI is going to be the wrong decisions. The problem is, though, they're dealing in a world and with a technology and with people who create the technology who are anything but humble and modest about what they're going to do. Some of them think that AI is going to save the world, and the AI applications come out and confidently state that the prediction they're making is the best prediction possible. So you're dealing with a perplexity of governments expected to be modest against a technology that is far from modest in terms of the promises and the expectations they make. And this kind of situation as well can lead to a lot of errors by government. The first thing that would happen is that you would be overly modest and under enforce and under regulate. But often what happens with government, if you do that for a while, and I've done this, and I did this in a previous email, previous week working paper, governments tend to overreact and they go too far in the other direction, and therefore become overly rigorous and less thoughtful. Next. Some of the commentators on this are now thinking maybe it's time that we started comparing AI with the normal technologies that, of course, have caused tremendous change ever since the Industrial Revolution, and see what we can learn from those. I'm very favorably inclined towards that, I must admit. Therefore, you'd be probably arguing, which I think came out of one of the ones I think FSN sent me. A guy was simply saying, I'm looking at my business. I don't see any rate of return on the AI investments we're making. And that fed into the normal technology thing. Technology takes a long time to generate benefits, and can also take a long time before people fully realize the errors and the mistakes and the costs. So it's a two-part thing. And that's the argument for treating AI as a normal technology. Next. I think this is definitely much better than the kind of dystopian and high expectations that people are now putting out regarding AI. The process is going to be slower, and that was true of the information and digital revolutions. It was true of the Industrial Revolution itself, etc. It's not a matter of weeks and months. It takes years for organizations to change cultures, buy the training, buy the equipment, etc., etc. And this is called the productivity paradox in the computer age. And there's growing evidence that this will be just as important, if not more so, with artificial intelligence. Next. AI is full of surprises. When I was in the middle of preparing the material for my current paper, the big surprise, of course, was China coming up with DeepSeek. I don't seem to remember that anybody was forecasting that China would end up catching up that quickly, and why they would do it and how they would do it. I think this is a very interesting double-edged sword in a variety of ways. I'm pleased to see it. For those of you who know me better, I think I've worked a total of 6 years in China. Loved every minute of it. Worked with some of the smartest people and best people and nicest people I ever worked with. And so I've got a very high view of the capabilities of China, regardless of difficulties with their current state, the current quality of and style of government. But what the Chinese appear to be doing, based on the commentary from American writers, not from their own is they focus more on making AI useful to businesses and to other users. Whereas the big guys, the OpenAI guys and so on in the United States, seem to be more worried about the next big thing and being the first to have artificial superintelligence and all that kind of stuff, which some critics suggest we can't even define it. How will we know when we have it? But anyway, Chinese are much more straightforward on this issue. Next. Back one more, I think, Peter.
Oh, up one or back one?
Back to
The 9?
yeah. The negative side on this is how badly I think the government of the United States and the AI oligarch in the United States are responding to this threat. I don't think they're helping this process along. They produced, of course, their own White House action plan, which some critics, and I'm one of them, suggest they basically are ruling out international cooperation and collaboration. A lot of people suggest the way in which the U.S. government's going at this, going at the strategic competitive game on AI, will make China the ultimate winner, who I think are positioning themselves extraordinarily well to be working with other of global South countries in a manner that could be very, very interesting over the next 2 to 3 years as what I call the other AI wannabes, which I've listed some of them there, are now in consultations with China as to how this climate change and a variety of other things that the government of the United States now is ignoring, they might be able to work together on and find solutions to. Next. I'm just going to hit a few of the competition ones that I like. There's some great work done on, if you're a big cloud company in the AI game, and those are mainly in the US and China, you have an awful lot of market power that are just now starting to be realized. Tremendous work is being done on price collusion, both from the point of view of it being caused by AI, maybe even by AI agents themselves doing it without human oversight. Increasingly, I've come to the view, and I may have said this in the previous one, that competition problems in AI may be relatively minor compared to consumer protection, privacy, copyright, other IP violations, and so on. So if you're worried about competition in the AI business, I think more time should be spent on those consumer issues, IP issues, and so on. Those may be much more important to innovation and fair competition. The AI firms in the United States and elsewhere have realized if they can win the political market competition game, that's more important than serving customers better. And that seems to be very much happening, not only just in the United States, they're also making some very good headway with the UK government in ways that got me scratching my head. Next. Just some other things here on the fair competition issue. We may be facing the day where our competition on AI matters will depend more on non-North American and non-advanced country advances in AI. As you might, some of you might know, I did my PhD on competition law and policy in India, and I sure met an awful lot of very smart people there, as I did in China. Did some great work in Indonesia, and presented at conferences in Brazil. And I'm thinking there's a sort of a BRICS type network now being developed around the AI and other innovation issues that could mean that we'll be buying more from them with this kind of stuff than from the United States. One final thing, which I'm looking at in other contexts, is that I think the labor market problems that AI causes may be much more serious than the product and innovation market problems. That means that a lot of workers could be harmed quite badly by AI being abused by their employers, and there's been some very good work being done on that. And think about a household that's getting harmed by AI, both in their labor market transactions as well as product market transactions, and that's going to be triple the size of harm from their point of view. Next. One of the things I found really interesting is that as LLMs and other AI gets bigger and more sophisticated and does more things, they also seem to make more errors. The so-called hallucinations become much greater, and the safety and security risks seem to get much greater. And that is an important theme throughout the last 8 months that I wasn't thinking about as much. And most of the people who are writing this way believe that AGI and AI superintelligence, if anything, will make a bad situation worse rather than the other way around. Next. Another aspect on the extension of this theme is the analysts who are finding that as AI models get larger and more sophisticated, they make more mistakes, and that doesn't strike me as being a surprise or anything like it, for two reasons. First off, They may not even know they're making the mistakes as it gets larger and more complicated. I have that sense. And secondly, of course, the creators, owners, and users don't know the whole thing has become so sophisticated. They find, I use the term throughout here, inexplicable. AI is proving difficult to understand and explain to others and to themselves by the creators, the owners, users, and so on. So in many ways, AI may be superior to human beings, but they will also continue to be what I call boundedly rational and aligned with our interests in a variety of other ways. Next. I'm gonna stop here. I haven't heard a comment, and nobody's got upset with me yet, and we seem to be right on time. But my next ones are sort of my own quirky ideas and things that may not be all that important, but are things that I was having fun with as I was putting this together and as I'm writing my next document. First off, I'm seeing the Hintons of this world playing the what I call the existential double-edged sword game, where they're arguing, well, on the one hand, we've got a technology that's going to save the world and take us to space. That's, I guess, Elon Musk. And on the other hand, could destroy humanity and make human beings totally useless. I don't think those kinds of discussions are particularly helpful. And I think it particularly plays into what I call the negativity bias that permeates a lot of the AI literature. When you get to the point where you're expecting the worst from a new innovation, I think that becomes problematic. And I don't think the Hintons, who otherwise used to be a really great guy, but I don't think the Hintons of this world, I'm using him just as an example, are helping themselves out all that much or helping out the technology all that much. Next.
Weird. There we go.
Okay. I attended an excellent, and I'm not going to use any names in this case. I attended about 6 months ago an excellent AI piece done by the University of Carleton, which is, of course, my old university. But I got put off by one guy who actually made an excellent presentation when saying the key to AI is to make sure that consumers accept it. Well, that doesn't strike me as being a particularly useful way of trying to promote AI. It's important that consumers, users, the general public learn to understand AI and consider AI and the people creating it to be trustworthy. And they're going to have to earn that trust. I think that's true of any technology. I probably said the same thing about biotechnology when I was working on that. And a good example of that, based on my recent research, actually, is on what we call the on-demand economy and consumer, where literally the Amazons of this world, in many ways, have earned the trust of consumers by providing a very good service. I think the same thing holds for AI. In other words, public trust must be earned and not simply bestowed. One of the things that worries me is it seemed to me as though there was a lot of articles where AI people were admitting that there were some corrections they need to make. I wasn't convinced from the literature they're actually going about doing it. They're simply saying they need to be doing it. And some of it, of course, is regarding some of the harms that are taking place on younger people. And I'm seeing a lot of hand waving rather than major progress. I might be wrong about that, but if so, the progress is being buried somewhere, and that's another problem. Also, finally, the more you trust AI, the more you're going to develop an unhealthy dependence and reliance on AI to the point where you can't even think of doing anything else. And therefore you'll not recognize and put the effort into better understanding the errors that you're hearing about and you're seeing. Next. I like this one, and I'm going to use the term, I didn't put it in here. A couple of guys have written up, using the term hallucinations, that's a marketing ploy. AI is not having hallucinations. They're making mistakes, which this guy said, a couple of guys have said, is a classic example in philosophy of bullshit. The AI is making a mistake and couldn't care less. That's a bullshitter. And using these kinds of deceptions and euphemisms for AI mistakes covers up the source of the problem and what you need to do about the problem, and makes the problem look as though it's going to be easy to go away. And the guys who wrote these articles, who I really liked because I agreed with them, were saying the same thing. Next. Been some very interesting work done by some regulatory experts on the complexity of AI and what they call multifunctionality. And the interesting thing about multifunctionality is you can have the same AI application, but it could be doing a whole bunch of tasks, good tasks and tasks that are good, tasks that are bad, et cetera, et cetera. And these guys argue, and they argue very, very well, that this means, therefore, you cannot be focusing on regulating a particular task or a particular application. You gotta be focusing on the outcomes. Otherwise, the way I like to put it is, otherwise you are throwing out the benefits with the AI bad bathwater. And I think there's a real danger of doing that with AI. Next.
I don't know why it won't change. There we go.
Been some fantastic work done, actually much of it before the start of the school year, including some very good work by the Globe and Mail of all places, on the evils of AI sycophants, self-serving flattery, how AI is literally designed to make anybody, but young people in particular, to really like the AI application they have. And there's real risks and dangers here. And that it can also, this kind of AI sycophancy can cover up, can cause psychological problems, et cetera, et cetera. What I found interesting about this is mainly being applied to young people, and it's, I think, well worth doing it. But I've done my own work on narcissism and in fact, I think I actually presented on this a number of years ago at FSN. I've done my own work on the distinctive attributes of the rich and powerful, particularly in corporations, and how that explains often their misbehavior. And I think if Elon Musk had not appeared on the scene, I would have invented Elon Musk, because I think this is what I'm getting at. These are people. Imagine corporations that have two sets of underlings. The human underlings, they're telling them how fantastic they are, and their AI underlings, their AI agent underlings, who are, of course, trying to flatter this guy and making them feel so much better about themselves. I think this is a whole set of things that I might go back to my AI narcissistic study, etc., and see to what extent this could be fitted in. But I think it's worth looking at. How does this kind of sycophancy affect anybody who are receiving flattering comments from both their own employees and their friends, as well as, of course, from their AI friends. Next. First off, the sycophancy that has been explained to me anyway is that it constitutes very much a general and integral behavior of AI systems that's built into them. And getting that out of there will be, let's say, a challenge for people who want to make more money, want to make money from their artificial intelligence. And there's now some hints going on that we might have to start looking at when you have an AI friend and personal friends and employees, et cetera, how you interact with both of them together could be adding some nuances to these issues that could, among other things, lead to non-compliant behavior by major corporations and their senior executives. And therefore, organizations under this kind of dual flattery for their leaders could become even more antisocial in the future. I love the term that one guy that I've read called toxic organizations. I think that's a good one. Next. tremendous amount, as I mentioned before, on learning, education, and brain power and development. And I went through a lot of this. I can't say that I really understand it.
Kind of draft and then discuss with you further. Yeah. Okay, so let's think about that for our pre-sprint planning.
Okay, thank you. Okay, go ahead, Derek.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, this literature is now being very well developed. People are looking at a lot of things about how overuse of AI can cause you to can erode thinking skills and so on, can lead to cognitive atrophy, et cetera, et cetera. And here again, they're mainly looking at education and the relationships between teachers and their students. But I think this can also be affecting the kind of on-the-job learning that we all depended on. When we started new jobs, we developed good friends, we learned from those friends and so on. AI could be having a negative influence on those kinds of relationships as well. Next. I loved, obviously we're learning that people can become very tired of AI. It's called AI fatigue, which can cause bad moods. One person called it grumpiness, which I sort of thought was good. But then I said, well, what about AI? Evidently AI, an application, a model, a chatbot, etc., can also experience fatigue. And what they call it, some of them call it cognitive AI fatigues, which would be similar to the kind of fatigue that their users are experiencing. So you start wondering, I'm starting to wonder anyway, if the fatigue is building up on both sides. Let's say you've had the same chatbot for 5 years, which some people are going to be having pretty soon, and working, and they're both getting bored with each other, which evidently is what's making both of them can cause fatigue on both sides. It's not unlike when you've been working with the same human being for 5 years and you get bored with what that means for bad decision making and so on. I'll let somebody else worry about that. I just found it was interesting if you bring those two together. Next. I'm having struggles with the whole issue of AI training data, the deep learning aspects, of course, and also autonomous AI self-learning, sometimes from interactions with humans. I mean, there's a lot of talk now about how the AI industry is running out of training data, and that could be really cut off if the makers of copyright are successful in some cases. Another thing that I think doesn't surprise, maybe because again I've done a fair amount of behavioral economics and neuroscience, is I'm not surprised that if you're mainly using human input to train your AI, that it's going to have the same biases, mistakes, prejudices, discriminatory aspects, and so on as human beings. And that I think is a major challenge because they're using us, so why wouldn't they be replicating us? And it could also get worse to the extent that a chatbot is interacting with their human user. This could become what I think one writer had talked about is a kind of negative recursive and feedback loop when the AI is literally feeding on itself, i.e. going on the internet and receiving the same material it produced itself. Next. What all this means, I'm not really too sure about, but I think it's a lot of fun thinking about this. Next.
Sorry, I don't know what's going on here. There we go.
I think we have therefore as well the perils of AI social interactions, i.e. the interactions between AI chatbots, et cetera, and human beings. And in many respects, I think we're saying some people are writing about some of the same dangers as you have with social interactions between individuals. And in many respects, and I've written about this already much earlier now in my understanding of this, is that when people are getting bad information and bad advice from their chatbot, that's a great excuse to excuse themselves and to justify to themselves and others why they go out and do anti-competitive strategies, non-compliant strategies, anti-social strategies, etc. It's the AI chatbot. It's the they blame the AI chatbot rather than themselves. And the problem is, of course, that I think despite all the discussion, there's no real moral, ethical, empathy, related human values, and no sense of guilt or anything like that yet being developed within AI. If anything, all you're getting is what looks to be fake sympathy, fake empathy, and things like that to make the user feel better and use the chatbot more. Next. And again, I think these kinds of issues are important, not just for younger people and so on. I think they're important to all other users as well, who are becoming more reliant on AI and so on. Next. But I've just read a little bit about this, but they're now talking about putting large language models, generative AI, and with deep learning into robots. And some people think this is interesting. Others are wondering about having, shall we say, a chatbot in the global wild let loose in a robot, and what that might mean in terms of the kind of harms that a large object could do relative to a relatively small set of computer programs. And in some respects, this gets not far from the kinds of science fiction stories that some people talk about in the case of AI. Next. I like this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but my experience is that as worlds become more complicated, people can experience information, incidents, their own experiences, and so on in very different ways. It's called construal level and distance theory. And as the world becomes more fragmented, more disjointed, distance theories can work in a number of ways. I think AI is going to be increasing the number of situations where two people seeing the same information are going to react very differently to it for a whole set of reasons that are well developed actually in the psychological literatures that these folks have developed without a lot of reference to AI, but there is some reference to AI that I'll put into the paper that I'm going to put out after I've finished my presentation in Toronto. Next. Just some other paradoxes and so on. I think it's kind of interesting that AI and its training data that's breaking copyright law and privacy law, etc., are, according to some critics, leading to perfect creations that may actually hurt actual writers, photographers, composers, etc., because the AI is more perfect, and therefore we human beings will find difficulty competing with the pseudo-fake perfection of AI. I'm particularly concerned about that because I've been a jazz piano player since I was 65, and boy, did I make a lot of mistakes. And I'd be easily replaced by perfect AI. I think there's other things here that people can read at their leisure if they wish to get a copy of this. And the final thing is, going back to the one I was making before, is that all the studies I've read about how AI, LLMs, generative AI, etc., can help in public administration, I haven't seen anybody talk about how you're going to handle the hallucinations, the decision errors, the deceptions, the lies, the boneheaded errors, etc., etc. And as one of my as the guy who wrote the snake oil book pointed out, predictive AI is falling far short of the promises, and perhaps it may even be more hazardous to use than generative AI. Next. I got thinking. I taught economic history for about 5 years at Carleton after I graduated. I've always loved Adam Smith. It seemed to me as though responsible and accountable AI needed to revisit Adam Smith, but the full Adam Smith, the one in The Wealth of Nations and the one in The Moral Sentiments, but also the Adam Smith that developed a very good economic growth and development model that has been ignored too much, in my humble opinion. But also going back to Adam Smith gets you back to the kind of AI governance and regulation regimes that we might want to take a look at, that I've been working on in other contexts. Next, please. There's a lot of governance proposals about AI that suggest that they've got to be, that the governance requires systems that are more open, more balanced, that has wider representation from users and consumers, and so on. We've been working on that issue from the point of view of the on-demand and digital economy. And I think it applies even more to AI. AI requires a lighter touch. That gets back to the you don't want to be killing the good stuff. Next. And it gets away from it provides a mix of different approaches. And one of the things I must admit that worries me about what the EU has done, although I give them a lot of credit for trying, is the whole idea of having a single law and a single agency promoting responsible and accountable AI. Strikes me as being pretty dangerous in itself. You need competing regulators as well, both government regulators and the self-regulation by the AI companies themselves, and what people call non-state regulators. In other words, much more have an awful lot more people involved. And finally, and I think the EU realizes this, when AI raises competition problems or consumer protection problems or privacy problems, we're not badly set up to address those. And if we're not well set up to address those, it's because they haven't passed the appropriate law for the general set of issues that those kinds of things raise. Next. I'm just going to hit a few of the things that I think behavioral economics particularly helps out with here. I've already talked about the negativity bias, the view that public trust and acceptance of AI and any other disruptive technology is much greater when users and consumers feel they have control over the technology and they have choices that they can make. Next. There's some, I think you need to go back a bit, Peter. Next, yeah. One study that passed my desk just about a month ago, I think, is on how the biases that humans inherit from AI are then experienced by and tend to get replicated as people then move into other domains. In other words, as you move out of your AI world, but some of those biases that you learned from your AI through your AI chatbot can be influencing what you're seeing and what you're talking about and doing in your non-AI world. And this leads to me to think that AI biases can have infection and contagion and pollution type effects that can go well beyond AI itself and the AI world. On the good side, there's very good work going on, in my view, on how AI can increase our understanding of human intelligence. The way in which evidently Deep Six did this, but it's being done elsewhere, is that with LLMs, people are learning that reinforcement learning and imitation and other isomorphic facts operate as complements and work together. And I think that's actually something that is important outside of the AI community too. I've got some other things there that people can look at in their time if they're interested. Next. And finally, there's been work going on behavioral political science and in ways that I've already been talking about. And one person pointed out very, very, very well the new political economy work that suggests that rather than imposing utility maximization on AI and all of us, that we look instead at what new technology, etc., means for helping us to live a better life, a flourishing life. This guy talked about. I think that's a useful concept, because not inconsistent with my Adam Smith bias. Next, from complexity science, I've talked about in the previous one a great deal about the layering of complexities and how that should be, and that is being looked at. How the complexity of AI can lead to a more chaotic and complex external environment for AI, and then works back again. Next. Work that's been going on how complexity within complexity science and chaos theory on how highly complex systems can increase social complexity, social fragmentation, and wicked problems, which sort of gets me right back to my slide 3 visual. Also, from complexity science, equilibrium in the state is not certain and almost is rarely achieved. And fortunately, this is an area that competition law is now starting to pay quite a lot of attention to. That is that when businesses are operating under the fog of uncertainty and complexity, they make different decisions, and in some respects, that can be used to improve the promotion of compliance with laws and regulations. Some work on recursive feedback loops that AI is generating, and I mentioned briefly. Next. In chaos theory, the main thing that I focused on, because I understood it, is what they call the butterfly effect. And I was really looking, and while butterfly effect basically means that that the things we do are sensitive to initial conditions and changes in initial conditions, and that very small changes, and in this case in either the external environment or in fact in an AI algorithm or training data as well, that very tiny changes can have major repercussions. And I thought first off, it struck me, the China DeepSeek thing, it was just another chatbot. It was interesting, but it was a chatbot. And we'd seen so many of them. But it is now being referenced all over the world by people who know even less about AI than I do. That to me is an example of a butterfly effect in action. Next. The next one that would be interesting on the butterfly effect is how just small, tiny changes, let's say in a single task of a multi-purpose AI algorithm, could have effects that you would never expect. But the best one I can think of is when that one law firm and one lawyer had problems with using AI to come up with a case that he was using as a defense case, and it turned out the AI made up the case. That is a relatively minor incident in the AI world. It's being quoted everywhere. I decided not to quote every time. It would be interesting to do an AI on how often that case gets quoted in studies. I bet you it's well into the hundreds, all over the world. This to me is an example of the butterfly effect. A very small incident gets magnified because it's AI, because AI is very sensitive to internal conditions and so on. Next. Just more on that. But I think that I think the butterfly effect is something that I might give more attention to, but I'm hoping other people who are not more knowledgeable than I am will. Next. Most of the areas I talked about, as with the previous, my first presentation, requires more research by people that are a lot smarter and a lot more experience with the AI than I am. But something that I am thinking about as the government of Canada decides to go in the AI direction is, and I think I've actually had opportunities to discuss this in FSN, is it's time to do a rolling study kind of thing on what consumers, users, small businesses, and so on think about AI, what their attitudes are towards AI, how they're using it, what their problems are, et cetera, et cetera. And thanks to basically just good luck, myself and the consumers and the consumer group I'm a member of, and another guy named Jay Jackson, we did a study in 2019 on the on-demand consumer in Canada, which which had a strong behavioral focus. And I think I like the study a lot, but of course I helped to do it. But we had the opportunity of doing it again, and we finished it in 2024 to find out how things changed during the pandemic, to what extent people's attitudes changed, and so on and so forth. I would propose to the government of Canada that this kind of rolling study be considered by the people running the AI, governing AI in Canada. And you particularly focus on consumers, users, and small business, which reportedly, according to some American analysts, is a major strength of AI in China. It's not focusing on the big guys; it's focusing on everyday use, which I think is very, very exemplary. Next. Okay. I'm not going to. I've got another 12. I had a wonderful. I greatly enjoyed putting together, actually more than a few, what I call interesting quotes. Unfortunately, most of them are on the dark side that people did. I'm going to just. I think I'm basically on time. I'm just going to make I'm just going to take a look at a couple of them. Next. Something on the White House action plan that people have been talking about. The same technology that can be used for image classification and reverse image search can also be used for mass surveillance. That I find really scary. Is literally the same app. So you don't know what people who buy and create that kind of thing, you don't know what they're going to use it for. Next. Somebody suggested our new Minister of AI must not be naive to its harms. What is needed now is not euphoric cheerleading. I found myself saying that most of the time when I've been reading their stuff. Next. I love the comment about the AI generated apocalypse. Next. I'm giving Hinton a rough time, but he recently put out a blog suggesting that we cannot force AI to submit to humans. Instead, he suggests building maternal instincts into AI models so that they genuinely care about us as humans and therefore won't wipe us out. Well, first off, of course, I think we have a fairly good literature that maternal instincts are not always positive in terms of the directions they take. And secondly, how the hell you build that into an AI set of computer programs is not something that is very obvious. It was a fun thing for him to say, probably, but and that kind of thing. Okay, next. Okay, for those who are interested and get the PPT, I've put in about 4 pages of the most obvious of the studies that I really enjoyed. Let's just go through all this. Anyway, thanks for the kind attention. if anybody wants to have a note that my first paper, which was developed by from my first presentation back in December, has been on the Social Science Research Network for a while. But I'll be happy to send you anything you want, including any other work that I've been doing or questions and so on and so forth. And there's my email address. So you've let me get through this thing without having a chance to recover my voice. So I'll be happy to hear from you.
You're muted, Peter.
Thank you, Steve. Let's see what's in the chat, but I'd like to begin by pointing out that hallucinations is a term that comes from the early days of AI research in natural language processing. We must remember that what we're talking about today, with a few exceptions of talking a bit about robots, is that we're talking about natural language processing. So that's about hearing and speaking and the natural languages that humans use. So that's only one narrow part of intelligence and our senses that feed our brain to give us a sense of what's going on in the world. So we're really dealing with a narrow part of AI, even in this conversation today. But the point is that in the earliest days of working with natural language processing, to get a sentence, say 10-word sentence that made any sense, took a number of years, let's say. And what they called it in those days was that it was hallucinating. So the term hallucination is not an invention of the media, or is it an invention of somebody along the way in the past few couple of years, 5 years, let's say. It's actually an ancient term in the AI literature, so to speak. I also would like to point out that you were talking a lot about regulation. And I think one of the things that should be stressed about AI regulation, however it's developed and wherever it's developed and how it's applied, is that it needs to be nimble. I think that was implied in some of your comments, Derek. But the idea of a nimble AI policy is quite different than any other policies that I think we've ever had, where the regulators have to actually constantly be monitoring in real time, in effect, what's going on with the regulations and how they're being applied and the negative implications of those regulations as the technology changes. So we have a whole new regulation regime, I think, under development as a result of the rise of AI.